Hello guys, and welcome to a new video here at the House of Devlin with Big Al Devlin, that's myself. Now I've just filmed a video called a trance-like discussion on the runes and what they offer, but I've written it as off at the moment, so I'll have to edit that as I go along. In that I was almost entered a trance-like state. By focusing simply on the runes. By talking about the runes, I was somehow entered a focus on the rune, and on the runes of the Elder fauthark script, and I simply just started showing knowledge that was coming to me at that point in time, knowledge that's perhaps already within me, or knowledge that was most likely coming from higher planes to my base self, and then ultimately then to my central self or my consciousness ultimately, and was simply being portrayed to yourselves. Now, without knowledge of the runes, I may sound like I'm talking a load of shit, and I kind of get that, guys, right? But I will hopefully take you through the journey that I've made over the last few weeks of studying for the runes. I'm still nowhere near a master, guys, but much more knowledgeable and can see the world for different ways than I used to do, at least anyway. And I feel like I'm really making significant progress in my not only the knowledge of the runes, because the runes are a minor aspect, or well, not minor aspect, but just an aspect of paganism. That, you know, you don't have to study the runes to be a pagan or anything along those lines. But through my studying the runes, I've made an actual connection to them. You know, I've always had an affinity for Seder magic. Even before I became pagan, I had an ability of Seder magic to some degree or another. I just had an innate connection to essentially fate and interpretation of fate, although Seder magic has ultimately given me a focus. So, you know, I don't just see the future randomly. I see the future when I see them. I want to see the future, and I see the past when I want to see the past, and the present when I want to see the present. Which I couldn't do before. I could only ever see the future. So Seder magic has definitely focused me and developed me, and I will be discussing that in another series as I develop my Seder. But Seder is a lot more, I feel, advanced than runic magic. I feel it's something that you have to be born for, to really get the most out of it, and I do truly believe that I was born for it, and I feel that my powers were, not powers, but my connection to Seder magic was enhanced through my death-like experience, as I say, my death and a rebirth experience, as I say, that I went through 2 years ago, and when I became a Hammer of the Gods, which is a position within pagan society, if you're unaware. Anyway, without focusing too much on that, because I'll start waffling and going off on another discussion about random stuff. I'm going to actually think in this video. I'm going to kind of hold my mind back to some degree. I'll open it as much as I can, but I want to try and hold it back as much as I can so that I can teach you what I've learnt, rather than what I'm learning right here, right now, so to speak. You know. The first thing is, obviously, you guys may want to obviously understand the origins of the runes that you may not know or understand. A selection of the runes are here. I am making my own rune stones at the moment. Okay, you can see them also on my fingers represented in my own personal interpretation. But as I say, I'm making my own rune stones for whichever purposes. Doesn't matter. You'll see once they're finished. But I will be sharing with you the forging of the stones, is probably so I'll call it. I will be showing you the creation process, and discussing the runes on an individual level, just so you get an overall taste for each and every rune by itself. But the next couple of videos I want to discuss the runes as a whole. Okay. Because that's really where I find that I've gained the most so far, from understanding the runes as a whole and how they interact as a whole, which is important, because you know the runes are not an alphabet in the sense that they are not a series of letters, as I've discussed in my very first video, where I was actually looking back at it very ignorant on what the runes were. You know, I knew what the technically the theory of the runes, what they were, but I didn't necessarily understand or have a deep understanding. Now I do seem to have an understanding of what they are and what they represent, and the power that is within them. I've actually felt and experienced, which of course is an important step in obviously understanding them. If you experience them, you will become to understand them. It's hard to have an experience on something without an understanding. As I've said in previous videos before, my personal experiences, you know, I had a motto that I used to live by in the past, and I live a Spartan lifestyle, so you know, it's not like I live by it, but it's what I thought of when people had opinions on matters that simply did not concern them, and that is the path of success leads to the path of success leads to the palace of wisdom. The palace of wisdom being simply that you know, if you've experienced, you know, a whole multitude of different life experiences within your time on this earth, then of course then you develop a wisdom and an understanding for these experiences, these life experiences, and so thus are able to comment on such things. But until you experience something for yourself, or certainly at the very least a third-hand perspective, then really you have no real sort of reason why you should discuss it. You know, if you don't understand or know about something, such as learning about man-made things like politics, okay, you don't need a first-hand experience of being a politician to vote, no, but you do need, in my personal opinion, a first-hand experience of having studied politics and the intricacies of how politics work, and when they say they're going to do this, you need to know what it means to really be able to sort of make the right vote for your country at the time. That's just an example of a man-made sort of thing, but you know, when it comes to nature and stuff like this, also it's way different. You know, it goes way beyond that. You have to understand potentially much more complex issues. My phones are going, I'm sorry, it's just emails. So anyway, at least that's broken my concentration and has allowed me to go back to what I originally wanted to do. And this video is going to be a discussion on where the runes originated from, or at least in my personal opinion, because it's complete and pure conjecture. Okay, no one really knows where the runes came from, why they were created, or anything along those lines. Now, obviously, if you believe in the stories, then you know, you will understand that they came from Odin. Or at least Odin was, you know, he found them by sacrificing himself to himself, by hanging himself for 9 days and 9 nights. But, you know, how did they appear within man, at least, if not the gods? This is something we don't know. Okay, but I have ideas on what it is, and the reasons and ideas, and on how they've developed to the point where they are now, and the significance of that. And I'm also then going to talk about how the runes as a whole give you knowledge. And then in the next video I'll be talking to you about the runes and how they work on a cosmological scale, how the knowledge that the runes have taught me on the cosmological level of the universe, but also how that interacts with the self, how that makes you understand that your personal development, how to reach your life goals, your missions, and how to discover them in the first place. There's a lot that can be gathered from the runes. Takes a lot of focus, takes a lot of, you know, a lot of effort, but if you're willing to put it in, guys, and you do have some affinity for it, then it's very much worth it. I very much recommend it. Now, the runes that we will be discussing are the runes of the Elder fauthark script. Okay. Now, the reason there are multiple scripts of runes, okay, the Elder, the Lesser fauthark scripts, and the Anglo-Saxon runic scripts, are simply because over time the Germanic tribes that created the runes split up, colonized different areas, and over time developed different languages and adapted the runes to be more preferable to their languages. Ultimately, they're the same runes. Ultimately, the same concepts are contained within each set of runes. But the fauthark script, which is what we're going to be looking at, is the original alphabet, if you wish, of all of the ancient Germanic tribes. As a result, by going back to the origin, you understand not only that, but you gain an understanding ultimately of the Anglo-Saxon and the Lesser fauthark scripts also. But by going back to the origin, you actually are learning ultimately the original language of all of the original Germanic tribes before they started to split up. When they did split up originally, all of their languages would have been fairly uniform. Now, in variations perhaps, but they would have been fairly uniform. Colloquialisms will not have developed, and the fauthark script, well, they are representative of the sounds that they would have used within a language, and that's what the alphabet, or the fauthark script, the fauthark alphabet, if you wish to call it that, represents. Just like our own alphabet, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and all that, they just represent sounds ultimately, but they represent far more than that, and this is because of the innate relationship that the elder people, the pagans of the time had, and they understood that sound had innate power, so we say, and associated with what you could describe almost as a sacred geometry, and associated with a specific specific geometry, and so on and so forth. Then the sound can be focused upon and can be used and tapped into for whatever purposes. But ultimately, even if you cannot use the runes for magic, okay, which not all people can do, okay, but even if you can't use the runes for magic, you can use the runes for at least increasing your understanding of the old languages. Ultimately, I suppose that's the best way to look at it. But when you can really understand it and connect to it, most importantly, and that connection really requires you to have a connection to your own gods. My patron god is Freya, but I have obviously a connection to all of the gods within the pantheon of the Nordic paganistic system. But my truest connection is Freya herself, and I believe a lot of the knowledge I receive, although traditionally the knowledge would be from Odin himself, who I have no doubt of his involvement in my development of knowledge. I believe that Freya is the one who has allowed me, at least, or certainly made my mind capable of receiving such knowledge. Now, for me, if you go into Wikipedia, for example, you would probably get a very academic, very structured answer where they believe the Germanic alphabets, as they would probably call them, come from, the scripts come from. They'll probably tell you that they, were the paganistic tribes at the time in Western Europe stole or borrowed or whatever the kind of the letters that existed in the alphabets of the Greeks and the Romans and Persian societies at the time, and other societies that used written language, and they took their letters and made their own letters out of them. They merged them together to create their own script and used that to form a rudimentary sort of written style. Now, my answer to this is, why don't you find things written down more often? If it was a written language, why do you not find things written down in the fauthark script more often? It wasn't created to be used to write books and novels and to make literature copies of things, of history, for example. It wasn't used to write down the history of the tribes, which would have been was incredibly important to the pagans at the time. Why didn't they write down their histories in the fauthark script? Why didn't they do that? Why didn't they record a history? Why did they continue to remember their history, remember their faith, remember their religion and their practices and their traditions through an oral manifestation? Why did they do it if they had now a written language? No, the fauthark script is far beyond that, and if you choose to believe in the academics, then I totally applaud that. That's no problem, because of course they're academics. They will be able to provide some degree of evidence to some degree to argue their point. However, I am giving you my own conjecture here, because they don't really have any evidence. They're just theories, very well thought out theories, but theories from people who aren't pagan. Theories of people who do not understand the runes, who do not understand the religion and the gods behind such religion. And so, if you wish to listen to me, someone who is pagan, someone who has 100% unbreakable faith in their religion, I will never stop believing in my gods and the pagan faith, because my belief comes from a death and rebirth experience. You know, I've seen the other realms, experienced them, as I say, through death. It took death to awaken me, but I was awakened, and my eyes will never be closed again, is what I'm trying to say. So if you want to listen to someone's interpretation of what the runes are from a 100% paganistic point of view, then and someone who's derived such answers through the study of the runes on a personal level, with, as I say, a paganistic outlook, then you're in the right place. Now, I'm not trying to say that I'm right. You could study the runes yourselves and come up with your own ideas. It doesn't really matter. The origin of the runes doesn't matter. I'm just putting this in here just for the sake of argument. But what really matters is the meaning of the runes, and the runes can mean different things to different people. That's the important thing to know. Yes, there are common meanings. Yes, there are common concepts behind the runes. The runes themselves are simply the language, as my mentor said quite beautifully, the language of ideas. That's ultimately just the way to understand it. And if you can't get any further in your understanding of the runes than simply of what is in a book or what is in a literary article on the internet, for example, and you know, by experiencing the runes, you can't experience the runes yourselves and sort of gain a deeper understanding, it doesn't matter. Then just take away one thing from this video and from all my other videos, that the runes are just simply a language of ideas. Each rune represents a myriad of ideas which have a set number of meanings, but also can be opened up to mean an infinite number of different meanings, because every single person who reads those runes is an individual, and if they have a personal connection to the rune, they may see something else through it. And these are the mysteries that the runes contain. The runes contain mysteries, and by only focusing on them, by working with them, can you discover your own personal mysteries hidden within the runes, and then you can share those mysteries with other people so that they learn what your mysteries you've discovered and experience hopefully the same thing, but they may also, experience completely different things. It doesn't matter. The one thing you'll learn about pagans, if you aren't pagan, but if you watch my videos, or if we become, as I say, a more sort of prime religion than what we are at this current point in time, then one thing you'll learn about pagans is that we don't really care about the differences in or the way that our religion is practiced as such. As long as the fundamentals are there, it doesn't really matter. We don't care about whether this pagan believes the exact same thing as this pagan. They can believe different things. They can get different meanings out of the same story. It doesn't matter. They can have different stories, but as long as what they have is of value and it is pagan, it is, rooted in the sort of, as I say, the fundamentals of religion, who fucking cares about the differences? We don't separate ourselves. We never have and never will. That's why the religion has survived longer than perhaps any other religion that exists out there. It's survived since the Ice Age, so it's a very, very old religion. Okay, far exceeds that of Christianity and Islam and everything else. So, you know, it's a very, very old religion for a reason, and I've just given you those reasons. So, my personal opinion, the runes really were first used as an oral tradition. That is, the runes existed, but not in written form. Okay, the runes existed in their sound forms, because the runes are that. They are the sounds, the very first sounds or syllables of speech, that the ancient pagans used in their language. And so over time, obviously, the pagans developed the runes to represent certain aspects or syllables or certain sounds that they used within their speech, and they wanted to represent them in a physical form, and so they created the runes. Now, the ancient people, and this really applies to all different branches of paganism, all believed that the spoken word was magical. It had magic behind it, had power, an innate power to some degree or another. And we get this really, even today, there's remnants of this sort of belief of power within the spoken or even the written word, but certainly the spoken word. And that is, you know, for example, in the saying, can you spell the word, whatever, to me, please? To spell a word. To spell a word. To cast a spell. Okay? And so that word, spell, doesn't mean, you know, to describe the word by letter. It actually means to incantate, you know, to have an incantation, or to chant, or to use Gulda magic, you know, with the word. And so that's really where the origins of the words, or the term to spell a word, comes from. Sorry guys, I've turned my phones off now. They're going crazy at the end of the day. It's a Friday night. Fuck off. I'm not available. Right, so see, I'm focused for you here today. I don't care who's ringing or wants to get hold of me. They're off now. It was unprofessional of me to have them on anyway, but I keep them on just for emergencies. But if people are going to send me loads of shit, then they can fuck off and the phones will go off. Right, so as I was telling you, that words are spelt or spelled, you know, so they have an innate power to them, and by forming a symbol that corresponds to the sound that you believe is magical, you know, this syllable, this sound, this pronunciation, if you wish, if you associate and create a symbol that is corresponding to that sound, then that symbol, which today we would call probably a talisman of some form or another, now itself also becomes powerful. It gains the power of the speech, of the spoken word. It gains an innate power to some degree, at least anyway, which can be unlocked by simply speaking the word, but it can also bind the power that is within that spoken word into itself, because it is a sacred geometrical shape. You know, that is how the ancient people would have seen the Elder Fauthark. That's how I see it. These symbols are not letters, they're not hieroglyphics or anything like this. They are sacred symbols, sacred geometrical symbols that specifically represent a certain concept or thing. I turned my phone off. The hell? My apologies. And so they, you know, there's this kind of concept behind these symbols, okay, and by binding the magic that is in that word into a symbol, you can then place that symbol onto something physical and give it magical properties. And that really is how to bind the runes. Well, binding of the runes is something different, but how to use the runes in one form or another is you simply inscribe the runes onto something. Say, like in the ancient times, you wanted your sword to be strong in battle and not break. Well, you'd put on the sword the rune of strength. Makes sense, yeah? To put on the rune of strength onto the steel strengthens the blade and makes it far beyond what it was physically capable of without the magic of the rune. Now, the runes themselves, or when I say the runes, the spoken runes themselves, that's the sounds that the runes represent, the original runes. Okay, are simply sounds, as I say. And what are sounds? Scientifically, they are vibrations. When I'm opening my mouth and speaking now, I'm vibrating the air. Well, I'm vibrating my vocal cords, which then send vibrations out of my mouth and vibrate the air particles into the speakerphones that you are now listening to. And these vibrations are picked up by our ears. Okay, and so this is how we communicate, through vibrations ultimately. And so the runes, as I say, the spoken runes, are simply vibrations that were created and upheld, or more, they were created by the universe and are continued to be upheld by the universe that we have today. And the universe is going through a constant set of microcycles within its macro cycle. So any pagan will know that time is a cycle. It never comes to an end as such. Okay, there is a start and end point, but those start and end points are the same point. Okay, and so time will go round and start again. And so you have an infinite loop of time. That is related to an infinite loop of fate, which is what is driving time, and time is what is driving, or giving definition at least, to life. And so when we say that the runes are simply the vibrations that the universe itself didn't create, the universe itself, but were created when the universe was formed and created, and the universe is then upholding those sounds, those runes, because currently in the universe there are many microcycles, i.e. fates. So our overall destinies go to Ragnarok, and we are going through a massive creation to destruction cycle. But within that massive creation destruction cycle that goes from the beginning of time to Ragnarok, within our own existence in this particular realm, you have lots of microcycles that exist for every single possibility and probability that could have ever happened within the universe. And that's where fate comes from ultimately. It's a certain pathway that is taken by these microcycles ultimately. And during the creation of the universe, there were sounds, or vibrations more to the point, that were created, that caused the universe to do certain things, and then these vibrations have continued throughout the universe to exist, because of course the universe is going through the same thing, just on a much smaller scale than what it is doing in its overall macro cycle. It is going through constant creation, destruction, back into creation, destruction, but all over the place. You see it, for example, in people. We're born, we live, we die. We have and our lives continue either in the realms or through our children. Okay, and so you see lots of microcycles all over the place. Now, by using the runes that we have described through the fauthark alphabet, we find that we can tap into this power that is within the universe itself. And as I described, fate drives time, the cycle of time, and time drives, or certainly defines, what life is. Because without the passage of time, you don't have life. If time stops, life life stops. Okay, so the passage of time must continue so that we have life, and so all three of these are all linked: fate, time, life. They're all linked to one another. Obviously, if the origin stops, then all of it goes. If this stops, then life goes. Okay, but it doesn't matter. Ultimately, they're all linked, and by tapping into the powers that created these cycles, these sounds, these vibrations that created these cycles, we are able to tap into the power which is contained within the web of weird, or simply the life force of energy. Okay, because bear in mind, remember that pagans believe that magic is simply life itself. Life is magical, but life is magic. Not all life is able to be controlled by us. We are a life form, a form of life, but we're not a life. Life is everywhere. Okay, and by tapping into a life that is surrounding us, we are directly tapping into magic. Life and magic are synonymous terms. Okay, and the runes allow us to do that when we focus upon them, once we understand what they are and once we're able to use them, if at all able to use them. As I say, not everyone necessarily can use the runes in such a manner. Now, these runes, as a result, are universal. They are constant. Some people may think, well, what happens when paganism dies? When? But it is a when, because of course Ragnarok. But paganism will never die, just like mathematics will never die. Mathematics is a universal constant. Sorry about that. I thought someone was at my door. It was my girlfriend. I was about to set my dog on her. So anyway, as I was saying, mathematics is a universal constant within the universe. It describes the laws of physics, and it will always be there until the universe comes to an end, when there is no more energy, there's no more heat, when entropy has had its ultimate toll. This is when mathematics dies, right? And the runes are very much the same thing. The runes are ultimately like mathematics, but they describe the, as I say, just what's on the other side of the veil, so to speak. They describe and submerge the physical world, the physical manifestation of things, but they describe the more subjective things. And so we see that they represent the more, as I say, more subjective rather than objective things in that sense. And so by tapping into the runes, we can understand the universe on a much greater scale than we could with all our sciences. Science is important. Science is one way in which we can understand the world around us. I've done a lot of maths and science myself, and I really do encourage people to learn it, because it's amazing. You don't really know what's in the world until you start learning about it. But the runes are another way of learning things that you can't learn through science necessarily. It gives you answers that science possibly may never be able to answer. So the runes are very, very important. Now, the runes, the way I'm going to end this video now, is to give you the description of what the runes mean at an immanent level. So the runes can mean things here, right around us, but they can also have meaning, as I say, within a cosmological sense, in the universe as a whole, i.e. the macro cycle that the universe is going through. Okay, and what the universe goes through, its own macro cycle of creation to ultimately its destruction, to the birth of another universe, or the birth of a new reality ultimately. You can scale that down and still apply it exactly the same to every other microcycle that exists. Every creative destructive cycle that exists within the universe works the same way as the entire macrocycle does. It's not as definite. It's just a possibility, not a definite. destiny is definite, it's unavoidable, but fate, you can work around to some degree. It's a strong pulling force that you can't really get around, but ultimately all your fates, whether you take a left or right turn, still lead to the same point. And so fate will always have its way. It will lead you to your final destiny ultimately. So it doesn't matter. Fate is fate, but destiny is destiny, and you can't avoid that. And so, as I say, applying ultimately the aspects that you get from looking at destiny into fate, a much smaller form of destiny, you can still understand a lot more, and you can understand how to then influence fate, or at least peer into fate, i.e. prophecy, or in the other way around, looking into the past and so on and so forth. But what I want to discuss now, as I say, finally at the end of the video, is how the runes apply to us at this human level, within us ourselves. If you look at the runes, there are 24 runes, and they come in a very specific order. You can't change the order, just like you can't change the order of the alphabet. The English alphabet, for example, you can't change it because it wouldn't make any sense at that point. You know, people will be like, hang on a minute, no, that letter goes there. Z is the 26th letter of the alphabet, and it will always be the 26th letter of the alphabet. Why it's been arranged in that way, I'm not sure of why the alphabet's been arranged in that way. But there is a very specific reason to why the fauthark runes are being arranged in their particular order. And it's been arranged because it is the sequence of cosmological events that occur as a whole, but also at a personal level for self-learning. So they actually are a guide into progressing your self-learning, progressing yourself as not only as a pagan, but as a person as a whole, whether you associate yourself as a pagan or just as a human being, doesn't matter. If you follow the runes will guide you into becoming the best that you can be. And that's really, for me, what I always take away is the meaning of paganism: becoming the best that you can be, becoming great, attaining a greatness, or doing everything that you possibly can to get it. That is what paganism is about. And the runes are the map that you can follow to attain that greatness. However, as I say, on the immanent level, and that's looking at them as a sort of a step away, so to speak. So I'll describe that in my next video, because it is quite complicated, it's quite complex, and I've probably lost a lot of the viewers here already in discussing the immanent level. But trust me, when we get to the complex level, the transcendent level, as I would describe it, as the cosmological level, I'm going to lose so much more with you, but it doesn't matter. I need to get this knowledge out there, and I hope that at least you listen and you go, there's sense behind what is being said. I understand a little bit more about what the runes are about, but for most people, this is what's important. Okay? If you're not trying to work out what your mission is, the meaning of life is to live. I'll give you that one. Okay? But once you've lived, died, and live again, as I have, and as have all the hammers of the gods, you come to the point of where you become locked in your cycle. Ultimately, once were clear on what your life was about. It was simply to live. Now you must discover whatever your mission is. Why am I here? What am I doing here? Because I'm not supposed to be here. I've broken my fate and become a fateless man. And so to me, the cosmological level of the runestones are much more important to me, because they can give me answers as to what I am supposed to achieve. As I say, I know one of the things I'm supposed to do is expand my knowledge of magic, of the old pagan magic. Okay, because at least that way I'm paying respect to the god that allowed me to stay here in this world. But also because I believe it will make me closer to her, and more useful to her when my death comes. Anyway, as I say, I am a waffler. That's the thing about paganism. We teach through waffling. We teach by taking you down a path, but then another path, then to another path. But just like fate, you may go off in this direction when you're supposed to be going in this direction, but sooner or later fate will always bring you back to where you're supposed to be. And that's exactly how paganistic teaching is. We always bring you back to where it's supposed to be. So let's get back to where we are. And as I say, the most important thing for most people is how the stones are representative of the individual, of themselves, of the self, as it's described. We can go beyond the self, as I say. That's more advanced discussions. Now we can divide the stones, as I say, up, because we have this very specific order of stones, 24, I call them stones, but the runes. We have 24 runes within the Elder Fauthark script in a very specific order, and so if you were to arrange them in rows of 8 in their order, or 2 lots of 4, whatever, however you wish to represent them, you end up with what's called essentially 3 sections of runes. And these sections, these elements essentially of the runes, are called aettirs. Now this is a more modern concept. This is not traditional paganism, and normally I err very much away from modern interpretations of paganism simply because I believe it to be wrong, to have been created by non-pagans who are trying to understand something they don't understand. But I actually find it actually very useful, this particular categorization, because it allows you to progress your own learning a lot better and easier. I don't know if that was the sort of goal, if you wish, behind doing this, or whether it's just a happy coincidence. But the fact that they're, in newer times, more modern times, the alphabet has been described as being separated into 3 aettirs, or the aettir as is the plural, then well, as I say, it doesn't matter whether it's coincidence or on purpose, has been, in my personal opinion, a helpful thing to do. And this is where I described earlier, or at least in my previous video, that paganism should be an organic religion. It is organic in its own nature, and it's organic in the way that it's taught, in the sense that it can progress with time, it can progress with society, it can progress with culture. It doesn't influence or impact again on any of these, where it does, but it doesn't. You are going to be whatever you're going to be, but it will guide you towards your best path at whatever point in time you are living at that point in time. And the way that the runes can guide you, as I say, is through their interactions with you as an individual. So these sounds were, as I say, seen by the ancient peoples as the sounds of creation, ultimately, and the sounds of destruction, the sounds of the macro cycle, the sounds of the cycle of fate controlling time, controlling life. All these sounds were created in almost like the Big Bang. These were essentially the sounds of the Big Bang, but also they are the sounds of when the universe dies. Okay, and so and all the bits in between. So this is what the sounds or what the runes represent. But they can, as I say, also represent you on an individual level. And if you look at the first 8 runes, okay, these are the runes that you would essentially associate with willpower. What I personally would say is your base system. Okay. So if you imagine the runes of the first 8 runes, these are the runes of your base system, i.e. your autonomic system, your sort of your subconscious. That's the best word to use. Okay, the first 8 is representative of your subconscious. The second 8 and is you at your most dense, i.e. your physical body. You can't control your subconscious. You cannot control your autonomic system, which is your blood pressure, your heart rate, your breathing to mass. I know you can control your own breathing pace, but most of the time you just breathe at whatever pace your body tells you to breathe at. Things like this, whether you open or dilate or constrict your pupils, things like this, your body does a lot for you without you knowing about it. And it is at this subconscious level, this autonomic level, as I say, that we are our most dense. Okay, and this is what the first ayat represents, us in our most physical forms, essentially in our forms of Amir himself, because we are born of Amir, our physical selves. This is representative of our descendancy from Amir himself. Okay, the second ayat is sometimes called the sacred space, or your soul. I would call it your self-awareness, which is, going to cause, other pagans to disagree with me, but this is my interpretation. Your second most dense aspect is your self-awareness, your consciousness. So you go from the subconsciousness to your consciousness, and you could really view it as coming from here. Okay, but really it does come from here, your brain. We know this, okay? But your soul or your consciousness is the next most dense thing, because we've gone from body ultimately to mind, okay? And this is what the second ayat represents. And most of the runes in the second ayat, for example, will interact with this aspect of you, your consciousness, your soul. The first ayat represent more of your primal aspects, the aspects that will interact directly with your body itself to some extent. It's an over summarization, but it's sort of getting brief concepts over. And I've already spent 46 minutes doing it, so this isn't that brief, but it's as brief as I can make it. And the third ayat is your higher self. Just like we have a subconscious that controls our body, and just like we have a consciousness, which is our personality, the thing that makes us us, we also have a higher self. Body, mind, spirit, almost like that in modern terms. Okay, and this is the least dense aspect of us. It's still a part of us, and there is a corroboration. There's a cooperation between these three aspects of us: our body, our soul, and our higher aspects, which you could associate with your third eye, ultimately, or what you would want, whatever you would want to represent it as. As me, I represent it as our connection simply to the gods, as our, how our souls are still linked to the gods. So our soul is essentially, our consciousness is our second ayat, but how that links still to our gods. And we are linked to Odin, for example. Odin was the one that gave us self-awareness. When he created Ask and Embla, he gave us the breath of ecstasy. But in doing so, he formed an unbreakable link between all men that would follow and all women that would follow. He created an unbreakable link, and that is why men strive to be like Odin, to be like the Aesir and the Vinir alliance. They strive to be like Asgard, okay, of the Innengard. We're the only other realm out of the 9 realms that actually is classified as the Innengard. And I believe this is really because we as a whole, humanity as a whole, humanity in certain aspects is very cruel, very nasty, very, very destructive, very chaotic. But as a whole, we are constructive. That's my personal belief. Maybe I have a bit of faith in humanity than others, but on the whole, maybe not at this point in time, but in our entire existence, we're not just looking at our past when we were very brutal. We're not looking just now where we're still very brutal, but we're less brutal than where we are. Imagine where we'll be in another 2,000 years' times. War may not exist. Either that or we will have destroyed ourselves. Well, that's Ragnarok. Okay, but if we if we are of the Innengard, and this is where we're progressing to, because we are of the Innengard, in few thousand years' time, we will no longer be at conflict with one another, apart from when it is necessary to defend those of the Innengard against the Isengard. No singular person, no singular race, be it god, man, giant, can be completely of the Innengard or the Isengard. If you look at the gods, I'm sure there are many of the Isengard. I mean, look, Loki led the forces of giants, or leads the forces of giants during Ragnarok. You could describe him of the Isengard, of the forces of destruction, even though he is one of the Aesir tribe. If you look at the giants, I imagine, yes, the majority of them are described as being, of the Isengard, of the forces of destruction. I imagine most of them are in between, are a little bit destructive, a little bit creative, but then there will also be those who are purely creative. Actually, one of the children of Loki, to Angrobida, I believe it's pronounced. Anyway, the mother of Jormungandr, Hel, and Fenrir, who are all major players in Ragnarok, they actually had another child, a daughter, the eldest of their children, and she was just a beautiful thing to behold. She wanted no harm to be done within the world, and that's why she's rarely mentioned. She's more of a miscellaneous point, but she was a giant, and she was born of the same stuff as Jormungandr and Fenrir and Hel, and she's really a being of creation, not destruction, despite where she comes from. And so what I'm saying is, yes, we will always progress towards the Innengard as a whole humanity, and as I say, not just taken within this moment of now, but within all of our moments combined. We are of the Innengard, we are of the creative forces. We create life, we create things, we bring order and justice to time in the universe, but we do have destructive elements within us, and there will always be destructive individuals within us, even when we have attained the highest possibility that we can achieve, where we are almost like the gods themselves, almost clones of them in the way that we act, and that there will always be destructive elements, there will always be Lokis amongst our ranks, because that is our nature. That's the nature of everything around us. Okay? But the stones, as I say, or the runes, represent, as I say, a gradual decreasing in density. The first 8 runes are our bodies, ultimately, our subconsciousness, the bits of us that we cannot control, the more primal aspects. You could almost put our instincts into this aspect of, the runes. You then have in the second ayat that which we are aware of, that which we have control over, our decisions, our choices, and things, the consequences of those, that consciousness of our soul's decisions, so to speak. And then the third ayat, the least dense of them all, is again almost like the subconscious, something that we're not aware of unless we make ourselves aware of by awakening ourselves, as I am trying to do with myself at the moment, trying to do with yourselves by trying to teach, to open your eyes, not in a literal sense, but open your mind, perhaps is a better way to say, to what is out there. And this is the direction, it's the opposite direction actually, in which information can be passed to us. Yes, we can learn for ourselves. Humans are very intuitive beings. We create science to learn the world around us, and as I say, I have a complete and absolute respect for science and admire it, and I would describe myself as a scientist myself from my studies over the years. But as I say, as a scientist, most scientists only believe with what they can see or prove or, do themselves. But because I have seen the other realms, I'm 100% convinced of their existence. And so now I'm looking all the evidence is here, and I'm seeing evidence now. Whereas before I would have looked at this and scoffed and gone, nah, come on mate, you know, it's this world and that, only this world, and that's all that there is. But now I'm looking at it, I'm seeing the depth to which exists within the old religions. Their understanding of not just this material realm, but the spiritual realms also is outstanding. And as I say, once you start opening your minds and accepting and embracing the consequences of this, are that you then get a flow of knowledge. Not taught knowledge, you know, self-taught knowledge, like being here in the material realm, going out reading a book and learning for yourself. You get taught knowledge instead, or given knowledge from the gods themselves, from your higher self. As you develop that connection between your higher self and the gods, of which there is linked to, you can divine knowledge that you could never have found before. And the knowledge comes down to our higher self, which is almost a form of subconscious, but it's what's the opposite word of sub? Supra. It's our supra consciousness. Okay. Then it passes down into our base consciousness or subconsciousness, where it is beginning to be assimilated and incorporated into our bodies, but then it enters our soul, our consciousness, our self-awareness, and then we gain a knowledge that has been sent from our higher states. But to gain knowledge from our higher states, we need to work for it. It's not a reward for our work out, but I mean is that we need to pursue the potential knowledge that is there. We need to open up our higher pathways, and we need to interact with them. And there are ways in which you can do this, mostly through trances, but there are other ways as well. Okay, sometimes it just comes to you. I feel that a lot of the knowledge I've gained, I've been lucky in many respects. I've not had to work too hard for it. Some people may spend decades trying to learn this kind of knowledge, but this knowledge has entered it, burnt itself into my mind. I think subsequently, because simply, you know, because of my position within paganism, as a hammer of the gods, as a shaman, and a shaman warrior, you know, as a sort of a fateless man, I've been lucky in some ways to learn the knowledge with, as I say, minimum effort, but most likely because I'm going to need that knowledge at one point to better our people as a whole. Because as I say, I need to learn my mission, but within that mission, within all missions of the hammers of the gods, you've got to understand that we all want our people to become the best that they can. We want the best for our people. Not one of us wants to bring destruction upon our people. Doesn't mean you don't crack eggs to make an omelette. Of course you do, if you need to. But at the same time, you want to bring the people closer to the gods. I think really that's the mission of all Hammer of the Gods out there. This won't necessarily relate to all of you because you may not be of the same position, so to speak, or same aspect of paganism as someone as myself, but when you become that aspect, you must bear its role and its burdens. Obviously all pagans want to bring their people closer to the gods, perhaps, but it's not necessarily required of them. It's not their life goal. As I say, their life goal is simply to live until fate decrees that they will die. But when you've beaten your fate, so to speak, if you've defied your fate, then you've defied it for a reason, because you have something else to achieve. And really this is where the rune stones are going to help myself, and where I believe they will help other hammers of the gods who are out there and who feel lost in their cause. They can show you the way, or at least the first steps of the path that you must walk, and then after that then you can work out what else might be needed. But I'm only taking my first steps along the paths now are before me. I'm waffling now, I'm getting off topic, thinking too much but also thinking too little. I'm just opening my mind up again. This is what I'm talking about, opening yourself to higher paths. It's sometimes you just let yourself be overwhelmed with information sometimes, and you lose a bit of your own personality in the same runnings, but for good things, for good reasons. Thank you guys. I'm going to leave it there, and then later on I'm not going to film it right away because I'm tired. I have the flu at the moment, so my throat is very sore. But I will read to you the notes that I have written down, that I've gained from meditating upon the runes. This knowledge kind of burnt itself into my mind almost, into my higher self, but has now entered my as I say, myself, not my base self, but myself. But save me misquoting anything. I mean, I know it all, but I have written down everything I've learnt just in case. I have amnesia, and I don't think I'll ever forget what I've learnt, but just in case I ever do, then I've written it down in ways that connect to me personally and can reawaken the knowledge within my soul. But I don't think I'll ever forget anything that I've written down in here, because as I say, it's almost like I've been branded with this knowledge now. And so, but just in case, I will read, in case my memory fails me, the notes that I've made on the runes on a cosmological scale. That's our next video. Thank you, and I'll see you soon.